Let me ask you something before we even get started. If you look down at your ankles right now, at the end of a long day, and they look noticeably bigger than they did this morning, what do you think is actually happening inside your body? Most people would say it's their heart, or their kidneys, or too much salt at dinner. And for some people, that's exactly right, and it needs real medical attention. But for millions of adults, especially those of us over 50, the true cause is something almost nobody ever mentions. It isn't your heart. It isn't even your kidneys. It's a microscopic pump inside every single one of your cells, and that pump is running out of fuel. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Dr. David Aid, and if you're new here, this is a place where we take confusing health topics and break them down into something you can actually use, without the fear, without the jargon, and without the sales pitch. Today we're tackling one of the most common complaints I hear from people over 50, that puffy, tight, uncomfortable swelling in the lower legs and ankles that seems to show up out of nowhere by dinner time. I'm going to walk you through exactly what's happening at the cellular level, why the standard advice so often falls short, and which nutrients are quietly at the center of the whole problem. By the end of this video, you'll understand your own body in a way that almost nobody ever explains to you in a normal doctor's visit. So settle in, because we have a lot of ground to cover. Let's start with the basics, because once you understand the mechanics, everything else clicks into place. The medical word for this kind of swelling is edema, and all that word really means is that fluid has built up somewhere it shouldn't be, in the small spaces between your cells. Your body is mostly water, but that water isn't just floating around randomly. It lives in three distinct compartments. Some of it stays inside your individual cells. Some of it flows through your bloodstream, and some of it occupies the narrow gaps between cells, which we call the interstitial space. In a well-functioning body, fluid is constantly shifting between these compartments in a careful, balanced rhythm, moving out of the blood vessels to deliver nutrients to your tissue, and then moving back into circulation to be cleared away through your veins and your lymphatic system. It's a quiet, continuous exchange that's been happening every second since the day you were born. Edema shows up when that rhythm breaks down. Fluid starts arriving in the interstitial space faster than your body can drain it away, and it begins to pool. And because of gravity, it pools wherever you spend most of your day, which for the vast majority of people, sitting or standing, is the feet, ankles, and lower legs. That's also why the swelling is usually worse in the evening and noticeably better first thing in the morning. Overnight, while you're lying flat, gravity stops pulling everything downward, so some of that fluid has a chance to redistribute. Then you wake up, get moving, and the whole cycle resets itself for the day. So here's the real question, the one that almost never gets asked in a typical 7-minute appointment. Why does fluid leave the bloodstream and settle into the tissue in the first place? This is where we get into the actual machinery. And I promise you, it's far more interesting than you ate too much salt. The movement of water through your body is governed largely by two minerals, sodium and potassium. Sodium spends most of its time outside your cells, in your blood, and in that interstitial fluid we just talked about. Potassium, on the other hand, spends most of its time inside your cells. And water has a simple habit. It follows wherever these minerals concentrate. Wherever sodium gathers, water gets pulled toward it. Wherever potassium gathers, water tends to stay put. Your body invests an enormous amount of effort keeping sodium mostly outside your cells and potassium mostly inside them, because that exact arrangement is what keeps fluid distributed properly. And it's also what allows your nerves and muscles to fire correctly. The structure responsible for maintaining this arrangement has a name, the sodium-potassium pump. Picture a tiny, tireless machine embedded in the outer wall of every cell in your body, and I mean every cell, with thousands of these machines working in each one. Their entire job, around the clock, is to push sodium out of the cell while pulling potassium in, constantly working against the natural tendency of these minerals to drift the opposite way. This is not a minor, low-effort task. It is one of the single most energy-intensive jobs your body performs. Researchers who study cellular metabolism estimate that somewhere between a fifth and nearly half of all the energy your body burns at rest goes directly into running these pumps. Stop and sit with that for a second. Up to 40% of your resting energy budget spent purely on keeping two minerals on the correct sides of your cell membranes. Your body considers this balance so essential to survival that it's willing to dedicate an extraordinary share of its fuel supply to protecting it every moment, whether you're awake or asleep. Now here's what happens when those pumps start to slow down. When the sodium-potassium pump can't keep pace, sodium begins building up outside the cells, in that interstitial space. And remember, water follows sodium. So as sodium accumulates in the tissue, it pulls water right along with it, straight out of your bloodstream. The tissue becomes waterlogged. In your lower legs, where gravity is already working against you, that waterlogging is exactly what you're feeling and seeing as swelling by the end of the day. This is interstitial fluid retention happening in real time at the cellular level, and it's the true engine behind most everyday leg and ankle swelling. So the next logical question is, what actually makes these pumps falter in the first place? Because if we can answer that, we can go after the real cause instead of endlessly managing the symptom. There are two major culprits, and they're deeply intertwined: elevated blood sugar and a shortage of the specific nutrients these pumps depend on to function. Let's take them one at a time. You do not need to have a diabetes diagnosis for elevated blood sugar to be working against you here. Even blood sugar levels that sit below the diabetic threshold can trigger a process called glycation. Think of excess sugar circulating in your bloodstream as something sticky. When there's too much of it floating around, it starts attaching itself to proteins it has no business attaching to. One of the most important examples is hemoglobin, the protein in your red blood cells that's responsible for carrying oxygen and nutrients throughout your body. When sugar glycates hemoglobin, those red blood cells become stiffer and less efficient at their job. This is actually the same process measured by the test your doctor may order to check your average blood sugar control over the past few months, because it's tracking exactly how much sugar has been sticking to those cells over time. Glycation doesn't stop there. It also interferes with circulation through the small blood vessels in your lower legs, the very vessels responsible for clearing fluid out of the surrounding tissue. When that small vessel circulation slows down, fluid clearance slows down right along with it, and swelling gets worse. But there's something even more direct going on. Elevated blood sugar causes your kidneys to hold on to more sodium. As your body works to manage the extra glucose, your kidneys end up reabsorbing more sodium than they should. And as we've already established, water follows sodium right back into your tissue. Over years, persistently elevated blood sugar can also damage the small nerves in your feet and lower legs, which is the early stage of what's known as peripheral neuropathy, that tingling, numb sensation many older adults eventually notice. So if your blood sugar tends to run high, particularly after meals built around white bread, pastries, sugary drinks, or heavily processed snacks, it is quietly working against your legs through more than one pathway at the same time. Now let's get to the part of this conversation that almost never makes it into a normal medical appointment: the specific nutrients your sodium-potassium pump cannot function without. The first one is potassium itself. It makes sense when you think about it. Potassium belongs inside your cells, acting as the direct counterweight to sodium. When your potassium levels are where they should be, your body receives a clear signal to release excess sodium, along with the water that's been clinging to it. Adequate potassium quite literally helps your body let go of fluid it's been holding on to. The trouble is, the overwhelming majority of adults fall well short of what they need. Most health authorities place the target around 4,700 milligrams a day, and very few people come anywhere close to that without making a deliberate effort. Avocados are one of the richest natural sources, with a single avocado supplying a meaningful chunk of your daily target. A genuinely large leafy green salad, not a small side garnish but a real volume of greens, adds substantially more. Berries and a handful of specific vegetables round out the picture. The takeaway is simple: potassium has to become something you actively build into your day, not something you stumble into by accident every once in a while. The second nutrient working alongside potassium is one that gets almost no attention at all: magnesium. And yet magnesium is absolutely essential to this entire system for a very specific reason. The sodium-potassium pump cannot operate without it. Magnesium acts as a required helper molecule for the enzyme that actually powers the pump. Without enough magnesium on hand, the pump simply cannot run at full strength no matter how much potassium you're consuming. Magnesium also helps your cells manage both sodium and potassium properly, and it plays a role in relaxing the smooth muscle inside your blood vessel walls, which supports healthy circulation in your lower legs specifically. Most adults need somewhere around 420 milligrams a day, and just like potassium, the typical modern diet rarely delivers it. Pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, and leafy greens are some of your best dietary sources. Potassium and magnesium are partners in this process. You genuinely need both, and being short on either one leaves the whole system incomplete, no matter how well the other one is doing its job. But there's a third nutrient, and this is the one that ties the entire mechanism together. It's the one I almost never see discussed in the context of swollen legs, and it might be the most important piece of this entire puzzle. Vitamin B1, also known as thiamine. Here's why thiamine matters so much. We already established that running the sodium-potassium pump is one of the most energy-demanding jobs your body performs. That pump needs a continuous, reliable supply of cellular energy to keep functioning. That energy is produced when your cells convert the food you eat, particularly carbohydrates, into a usable fuel source. And that conversion process, glucose into usable cellular energy, absolutely requires vitamin B1. Thiamine acts as an essential helper in the metabolic pathway that turns sugar into energy. When thiamine is in short supply, your cells simply cannot produce energy efficiently, and one of the very first systems to feel that shortage is the energy-hungry sodium-potassium pump. So here's the part that should make a lot of sense now. Even if your potassium and magnesium levels are perfectly fine, a thiamine deficiency alone can stall the pump because the pump is starved of the fuel it needs to operate. Sodium piles up. Water follows. Your legs swell. This is precisely why a hidden vitamin B1 shortfall is so often behind the kind of stubborn swelling that never seems to respond to the usual advice. And here's where it gets genuinely frustrating, especially for anyone eating a typical modern diet heavy in refined carbohydrates. The more sugar and refined starch you eat, the more thiamine your body burns through trying to metabolize it. At the same time, refined carbohydrates have had most of their natural thiamine stripped away during processing. So you end up in a trap where your thiamine demand keeps climbing while your thiamine supply keeps shrinking. The result is a slow, quiet deficiency that builds over months and years, which, not coincidentally, mirrors the gradual, creeping pattern of leg swelling that so many people simply chalk up to getting older. Once you see the whole picture laid out like this, it becomes obvious why cutting salt and propping your feet up so often fails to actually fix anything. Cutting salt only addresses one half of the sodium-potassium equation. It does absolutely nothing to restore the potassium, the magnesium, or the vitamin B1 that the pumps actually run on. And elevating your legs simply uses gravity to move fluid around temporarily. It does nothing to repair the cellular machinery that allowed the fluid to leak out of your bloodstream in the first place. You're managing the symptom on the surface while the actual pump dysfunction quietly continues underneath it. So let's talk about what you can actually do about this, starting today. Step 1 is making potassium a daily priority. Aim toward that 4,700 milligram target using real food. Build a habit around avocado, since one alone provides a substantial share of what you need. Make your salads genuinely large, full of leafy greens, not a token handful on the side of a plate. Add berries and potassium-dense vegetables consistently. Interestingly, while bananas tend to get all the credit for potassium, foods like avocado and dark leafy greens often deliver considerably more per serving. If getting there through food alone feels difficult, a high-quality electrolyte powder that contains real potassium without a pile of hidden sugar can help close the gap, but read the label closely, because plenty of electrolyte and sports products are loaded with sugar that works directly against everything we've just discussed by depleting your thiamine and spiking your blood sugar at the same time. One important safety note: if you have any form of kidney disease, talk with your doctor before significantly raising your potassium intake, because impaired kidneys may struggle to clear excess potassium safely. If your kidneys are healthy, increasing your potassium toward the recommended level is both safe and genuinely beneficial. Step 2 is making sure your magnesium is where it needs to be. Aim toward roughly 420 milligrams a day. Pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, and leafy greens are an easy place to start, and pumpkin seeds in particular are one of the most concentrated food sources of magnesium you can find. Magnesium deficiency is remarkably common among older adults, partly because soil depletion has lowered the magnesium content of many crops, and partly because certain medications and health conditions deplete it further. Correcting it doesn't just support your sodium-potassium pumps, it also supports muscle function, sleep quality, healthy blood pressure, and your overall vascular health. Treat potassium and magnesium as a pair. Fixing one while ignoring the other leaves the job half done. Step 3, and arguably the most important piece, is addressing vitamin B1. The single most powerful move here is dramatically cutting back on refined carbohydrates and added sugar. This does two things simultaneously. It stops the ongoing drain on your thiamine reserves, and it lowers the elevated blood sugar that's been driving sodium retention and glycation in the first place. Once you stop burning through your thiamine supply on refined carbs, your body finally gets the chance to rebuild its reserves, and the energy supply to your sodium-potassium pumps can start to recover. Good whole food sources of thiamine include sunflower seeds, legumes like beans and lentils, nutritional yeast, and whole, minimally processed grains in moderation. For some people with a more significant deficiency, direct supplementation may be appropriate, and that's a conversation worth having with your healthcare provider before you start. When you bring all three of these together, restoring adequate potassium, restoring adequate magnesium, and rebuilding your vitamin B1 status while cutting back on the sugar and refined carbohydrate that's been undermining all three at once, you're finally addressing the actual root of the problem instead of chasing the swelling after it's already shown up. You're giving your sodium-potassium pumps both the raw materials and the fuel they need to do exactly what they were built to do: keep sodium and water where they belong and out of the tissue in your lower legs. I also want to explain why this connection so often gets missed, even by genuinely caring healthcare providers. When you show up to an appointment with swollen legs, the first priority, appropriately, is ruling out the serious causes: your heart, your kidneys, your liver, the possibility of a blood clot. That process matters enormously, and it absolutely should happen first. But once those serious causes have been ruled out, the conversation often stops at cut your salt, elevate your legs, maybe try compression stockings. The nutritional and cellular piece, the potassium, the magnesium, the thiamine, the blood sugar connection, rarely makes it into that conversation. Not because it's unimportant, but because a 15-minute visit simply isn't built for that level of nutritional detail. I'm not telling you this to criticize anyone in the medical field. I'm telling you so you understand why you may be hearing this explanation for the very first time today, and why taking ownership of these nutritional pieces yourself can genuinely move the needle. Let's talk honestly about timing, because everyone wants to know how fast they'll see a change. This is not an overnight fix, and I'd be doing you a disservice if I told you otherwise. These are cellular systems, and cellular systems respond gradually. As you rebuild your potassium and magnesium levels, and start cutting the sugar and refined carbohydrate that's been draining your thiamine, your sodium-potassium pumps slowly regain their footing over a period of weeks, not days. Some people notice less evening swelling within the first couple of weeks, especially if their deficiency was significant to begin with. For others, it takes closer to a full month of steady, consistent change before the difference becomes obvious. The common thread, as with almost every meaningful health change, is consistency. One good day of potassium won't undo years of running short, but a sustained daily commitment to feeding these pumps what they actually need, while removing what's been working against them, gives your body the chance to gradually restore a balance it was always designed to maintain on its own. Now, I want to be completely honest and responsible with you about something important before we wrap up. Leg and ankle swelling can have many causes, and some of them genuinely require urgent medical attention. Edema can be a sign of heart failure, kidney disease, liver disease, a blood clot, or other conditions that need a proper medical workup. If your swelling comes on suddenly, if it's only in one leg rather than both, if it's accompanied by pain, redness, warmth, or shortness of breath, or if it's severe and isn't easing up, please see a doctor right away. Don't wait, and don't try to nutrition your way through that. Everything I've shared with you today applies to the much more common pattern: gradual, both-sided swelling that builds throughout the day, gets worse with sitting or standing, and improves significantly overnight. That's the pattern so many adults over 50 have simply learned to accept as an unavoidable part of aging. But very often, it isn't unavoidable at all. It's a correctable nutrient and blood sugar issue happening quietly at the cellular level. So let's bring this all together. Your body has an extraordinary system whose entire job is keeping fluid exactly where it belongs. Thousands of microscopic pumps in every cell, working every second of every day, maintaining the precise sodium-potassium balance that keeps water in your bloodstream and out of your tissue. In the vast majority of everyday cases, those pumps aren't broken. They're simply running on empty. They're short on the potassium and magnesium they need as raw materials, and short on the vitamin B1 they need for fuel, all while being overwhelmed by sugar and refined carbohydrate that's depleting the entire system from the inside. Give those pumps what they actually need, take away what's been working against them, and they will get back to doing the job they've always been capable of doing. That's the real story behind swollen legs and ankles. Not just your heart, not just your kidneys, not just salt on your plate, but the cellular machinery of fluid balance and the specific nutrients that machinery simply cannot function without. If this video helped you see your own body a little differently today, do me a favor and hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Drop a comment below and let me know your age and where you're watching from. I genuinely read every one of them. And if you know someone who's been told their swelling is just part of getting older, send this video their way. This might be exactly the piece of the puzzle they've been missing. Thanks for spending this time with me today, and take good care of yourself.